Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon from the city of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you are staying safe in your respective countries. My name is Ali Mteri from the Communication and Information Technology Commission, and this is the virtual radio spectrum seminar, fostering commercial and innovative use. We are very pleased to work closely with the ITU to bring you this spectrum seminar. We have many interesting speakers who will present to you over the next 3 days, and they are all well-known experts in their fields. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to have a special welcome to some of our honorable guests who are joining us in this event. His Excellency, the Saudi Minister of Commerce, Mr. Majid Al-Qasabi, His Excellency, President of the Saudi General Authority of Civil Aviation, Mr. Abdul Hadi Al-Mansouri. Now, I would like to invite His Excellency, the Saudi Minister of Communication and Information Technology, Engineer Abdullah Alswaha, to give his opening remarks in this seminar. Your Excellency, if you would, please.
Thank you, Ali, and it's an absolute pleasure to connect with some of the greatest thinkers and doers of the radio spectrum of the world. If you ask me, it was like yesterday, the last time I met in the last ITU event with His Excellency, General Secretary Zhao, and we had a discussion in Budapest about one of the biggest opportunities in the 21st century, and one of, indeed, the biggest missed opportunities if we look into 2020, which is connecting the unconnected world. As we celebrated last year, 50 years of the inception of the internet, and we're looking at 50% of the world not being connected. But as COVID-19 has hit us in 2020, what we have realized is this digital divide of half of the world not being connected meant a healthcare divide, meant an education divide, and meant an opportunity to seize the 21st century opportunities divide. And if I could further elaborate, we're looking today at a lockdown that hit more than 120 countries, and more than 400 kids were not able to continue their education due to the fact of lack of connectivity. And if I look at the surge of telemedicine, how we could provide care for those that we care about outside of the ICU, we saw that telemedicine consultations jumped in 2019 from 200 million to 1 billion consultation. But again, there was polarization, where the unconnected world meant that your kids will not receive education, they will not receive basic health care, and in some cases of area cannot even have access to clean water and energy due to the inefficiencies of the power grids that we have today. And this is why this is so critical for us to come together as the greatest thinkers and doers of the world in the spectrum arena. Because if you ask me, if the digital foundation was the backbone for how resilient economies are in a post-COVID-19 world, spectrum is the lifeline. It's the lifeline for our kids to receive education. It has been the lifeline here for us in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for our SMEs to continue their business. Without digital payment and contactless payment, 70% of our businesses would have been in trouble. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing this across the globe. We recently, celebrated the end of the Saudi G20 presidency. And we have agreed collectively with the largest leaders in the digital economy that we must go back to realize the opportunities of the 21st century by empowering people, safeguarding the planet, and shaping new frontiers with a clear focus on digital. Because what is at stake is so large. The opportunity cost and the loss of productivity just because of 400 million kids do not receive education is close to a missed opportunity in productivity of $10 trillion in the next 10 years. And we have worked extensively with the ITU, and I would like to acknowledge His Excellency General Secretary Zhao, and we have created a roadmap of how we can effectively use spectrum and encourage and accelerate nations towards connecting the world by 2030. And we have found that the cost of that is close to $500 billion. But that $500 billion would mean a $10 trillion return to our educational system and thus productivity. It would mean safeguarding lives. It would mean prosperity for us SMEs and entrepreneurs that create 50% of the economic value globally. And if you ask me, locally here in the kingdom, and I want to acknowledge my colleagues in CITC for putting this platform together, in 2020, the EU Center for Digital Competitiveness ranked the G20 nations. And they coined that report as the digital risers. And by a mile, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia ranked number 1. And if you ask me, the underlying strategic pillars of how we realized to become the number 1 digital riser in 2020, in a year that was tough for everybody, but digitalization made the difference, I would argue it is our ability to increase the lifeline of the digital economy by 5x. I recall in the past 3 years, we were looking at a sheer or a mere 260 megahertz worth of available spectrum for our digital economy champions. And today we're looking at 1,100 megahertz, doubling it by more than 5x, and thus accelerating innovation as acknowledged by multiple international organizations, even by the ITU, as naming us as one of the top leading nations in terms of digital regulatory framework. So it brings me huge excitement to have the opportunity to open up this very important webinar and platform to connect the greatest thinkers and doers to have a dialogue and a conversation that will still and stir a collaboration towards compelling impact on how we could go back on realizing the opportunities of the 21st century for all by empowering people, safeguarding the planet, and shaping new frontiers, powered by the lifeline of digitalization that is radio spectrum. And I would like to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. This seminar is a result of close collaboration between CITC and ITU. So I would like now to introduce Mr. Harlan Zhao, the General Secretary of the ITU. Mr. Zhao, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. His Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Alswaha, Minister of Communications and Information Technology. His Excellency, Dr. Mohammed Tamimi, Governor of the CITC. My dear colleague, Mr. Mario Manovich, Director of the ITU Radio Communication Bureau. Excellency, the Minister of Commerce of Saudi Arabia. Excellency, the President of Aviation of Saudi Arabia. Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to follow our Minister Abdullah Alswaha. I joined the minister just 2 weeks ago for the launch of a new platform Saudi Arabia initiated for digital cooperation. And now it is good to see him today for the opening of this important event on radio spectrum for IMT 2020 and beyond. So I want to thank His Excellency for his support to our work on spectrum issues. We just heard from him that spectrum is a lifeline. He mentioned his discussion with me at ITU Telecom World September last year held in Budapest, Hungary. And he kindly mentioned this, but he did not make me a little bit more embarrassed by the fact that then he asked me questions. Secretary General, you talked to us that half population not connected yet. And you said you will not leave anybody behind. Can you please kindly tell me by which year we will have everybody connected? So that was my embarrassment, because in my opinion, that we have half population connected. This is a wonderful result of achievement of cooperation everybody for last 2 decades. and then to connect another half, which are in the poor area, poorly connected, and to get these people to our platform, beneficial to the ICT. I think that really is quite difficult. It's a very huge challenge. So that he noted my embarrassment, and then he said, yeah, we have UN SDGs. By 2030, we should achieve our SDGs. Can we have all these people be connected by 2030, which means only 10 years left? I was very hesitant to say yes. But of course, that this is our challenge. And the middle of this year, at the 75th anniversary celebration of United Nations, Secretary General of United Nations publicly announced at the Digital Cooperation Conference Summit that he would like to have everybody connected by 2030. So while I was hesitant, but our Secretary General of the United Nations already publicly announced that is our goal. So this is something we really have to work very hard, because to have 10 years to connect those not connected yet, we have to work much harder than before. And here, to have everybody connected, to have those not connected yet be connected, the spectrum, as our minister just said, is a lifeline. So I thank him for his support to our workshop. I want to thank the governor of the Communication and Information Regulatory Commissions, Technology Commission, for hosting this 3-day virtual event. We at the ITU recognize the CITC as one of the most developed regulators in the world, and the Saudi market as one of the largest ICT market in the Middle East. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Saudi Arabia on this year's successful, marvelous presidency of the G20. Under their chairmanship, I had an honor to join many of their activities, personally addressed several G20 ministerial meetings this year. Meetings where I emphasized the importance of driving the development of new technologies like 5G, with respect to both the digital economy and the progress on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This event has been designed to give everybody the opportunity, whether you are an ITU member or not, to learn more about the range of 5G related services from some of the most prominent experts in the field. I'm very pleased to see His Excellency, the Minister of Commerce, and the Excellency President of Aviation of Saudi Arabia to join us. Over the next 3 days, discussions will focus on fostering the commercial and innovative use of radio spectrum for 5G, the International Mobile Telecommunications 2020. This event builds on the strong partnership between ITU and the CITC, a partnership strengthened by the signature of an ICT cooperation agreement last year. Ladies and gentlemen, as the UN Specialized Agency for ICTs, ITU plays a central role in ensuring that innovative networks and rolled out widely. The innovative networks are rolled out widely and follow the highest quality standards. I call on all of you to join us and make the most of this moment in history to deploy technologies like 5G that promises to improve people's lives on a scale never seen before. So I repeated my messages various occasions this year, that if we still have 10 years to go to 2030, 10 years action, I firmly believe that without the 5G support, we cannot achieve those goals. I joined the director of our radio communication bureau, Mr. Mario Manevich, in appreciating the support and active participation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in our meetings and throughout our work. I look forward to our discussions and wish you all a very successful event. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Our next speaker will be the Governor of CITC, His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Al-Tamimi. The Governor himself has a strong background at the cutting edge of wireless research and innovation, and I would like now to invite him to speak on some of the topics that will be discussed here over the coming days. Your Excellency, if you would, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests and dear viewers, I have great pleasure in welcoming you all to this joint ITU-CITC Spectrum Seminar in fostering commercial and innovative use of spectrum. It's unfortunate that we couldn't welcome you at our beautiful city of Riyadh, but the very fact that we are able to organize such an event is a testimony that communication technology are more important than ever under unprecedented disruption that we have been experiencing this year. Let me share some stats and forecasts on the wireless technology landscape. Number of connected things have grown from around 5 to 50 billion devices over the past decade, and is expected to grow to reach 500 billion by 2030, 700 million of which will be connected vehicles. Since the COVID-19 pandemic started, global internet usage has grown over 70%. With this pandemic, digitalization across industries is taking place at striking pace, putting both innovations and technology adoption on an exponential curve. Smart devices have become inherently wireless in nature. This is making our digital evolution highly dependent on the access of the spectrum. With this new reality, an increasing number of organizations are now shifting their spectrum needs to become better connected than ever. IoT networks are increasingly powering the next generation of manufacturing. Unmanned aerial vehicles are gradually changing the operations of logistics. Network slicing, edge computing are altering the dynamics of wireless industry. There are some challenges we are facing right now. Balancing the allocation of spectrum, as more than 50% of spectrum in many countries is reserved for public sector, while less than 10% is allocated to mobile and broadband access. Figuring out the right mix between exclusive licensing principle and spectrum sharing scenarios, as most frequency and bands are not open for sharing between different services and users. While technology advancement over the past 2 decades increasing spectral efficiency by over 40 times, comprehensive reaction from all stakeholders to utilize these limited resources is not an option to move the world into the digital future. Moreover, challenges are bigger than ever to enable new technologies that will carry our digital future. How an open sky policy will leverage the most from the cross-border nature of new non-geostationary satellite consultation and their competitive interplay with national terrestrial service provider. Figuring out a fair, sustainable, and safe approach to enable stratosphere technology, like high-altitude platform system, and establishing new regulatory framework to coordinate its use of spectrum and prevent drones collisions. The command and control of traditional spectrum management regime is rigid and static, making use of spectrum data, artificial intelligence, blockchain databases, and making them accessible by spectrum users through spectrum governance is the way to reach our digital future. While many of these technologies may compete for access to spectrum, they can also have mutual dependencies and synergy with each other. A current example of this in the interplay between cellular and Wi-Fi networks, enhancing complementarity and coexistence of future wireless technology is the way forward. Measurements show that low utilization of many bands across the globe, which is a proof that there is an artificial access limitation-based scarcity. We should aspire to turn it into an abundance to accommodate all users and users. This complex challenge cannot be successfully addressed through a single stakeholder. A collaborative effort between wireless technology inventors, wireless service provider, as well as government wireless policymaker is paramount. Moving forward, spectrum regulators and managers are mandated to be agile and dynamic in their spectrum policies. Traditional spectrum management practices that are fundamentally rooted in the 20th century analog paradigm cannot be applied to manage spectrum use in the digital era. Fostering commercial and innovative use of spectrum is a main pillar in our national spectrum strategy in Saudi Arabia. We published a consultation this year on the band that will be released, and we engage with more than 60 global organizations on why, when, and how we plan to do this. Over 10 gigahertz of spectrum will be released by CITC over the next 5 years. We have been considering the feedback received to the consultation, and we are now developing our 5-year outlooks. All innovations, processes entail a mix of opportunity as well as unknowns. A part of what we would like to achieve here is to bring industry player, academics, and spectrum manager together to stimulate a better understanding on the way forward and seek answers to the important questions that have been highlighted. On collaboration with the ITU, we are pleased to have this opportunity to transform our national effort into a global initiative. Over the next 3 days, I look forward to following your shared experiences and knowledge to guide us toward a better global digital future. Finally, through this virtual platform and through your wireless devices across the globe, I would like to say thank you and welcome to Saudi Arabia.
Your Excellency. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now I would like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Mario, Director of the ITU Radio Communication. And in particular, I would like to thank him personally for the great assistance that he has provided in helping to organize this seminar. And we are pleased to have the benefit of his 30 years of experience with the ITU. Mr. Mario, you are very welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the ITU workshop on radio spectrum for IMT 2020 and beyond, fostering commercial and innovative use. Let me start by thanking the CITC of Saudi Arabia for all their efforts to organize this joint event and put together such a remarkable lineup of speakers from all regions and industries. This workshop could not have happened in a better moment. Indeed, at the recently held WRC 19, we have harmonized additional frequency bands for IMT to implement 5G. And a few days ago, we have adopted a worldwide common technology standard, the IMT 2020 standard. These are major achievements of the entire ITU community. This workshop is part of a series of events that will analyze the impact of the implementation of IMT 2020 around the world. There are exceptional opportunities offered by IMT 2020 or 5G in this very specific moment that can enable the development of new applications that rely on high connectivity of people and machines. This event will kick off by exploring the view of regional representatives on key spectrum management goals, principles, challenges, and best practices. It will then move to national approaches towards spectrum management. These approaches strive to meet the demand of all sectors and radio services and include exclusive access to spectrum, as well as open access to spectrum resources and spectrum trading. The following day, we will explore the many goals of spectrum policies, from providing certainty and promoting investment to fostering high spectrum utilization, from building a digital infrastructure to accommodating the needs of industries. We will see how new licensed and unlicensed mechanisms can enable the coexistence of multiple users and technologies, and how both public and private networks can respond to the demand of the various verticals. Ensuring fair access to spectrum is not an easy task. National spectrum managers must consider the requirements of all radio communication services, whether 5G or other emerging wireless technologies or other radio services, such as broadcasting and satellite services. In some cases, new radio technologies compete for spectrum resources on one hand, but on the other, they complement and depend on each other to provide seamless connectivity to the end user. Finally, we will dive into the low, mid, and high bands already identified under study for IMT 2020 and beyond. We will look into these bands from three perspectives: that of the IMT users, the one of other new technologies such as low-power wireless LAN, high-altitude platforms, WiGig, new radio unlicensed, and lastly, through the lenses of incumbent users such as the digital television broadcasters and satellite services. We will also look into how the new entrants can protect incumbent services. Dear colleagues, before ending my brief opening remarks, I would like to leave you with two thoughts that I believe that are of utmost importance. The first one regards connectivity and digital divide. As you know, our goal in the ITU is to connect everyone, everywhere. And achieving 100% connectivity will likely take a mix of technologies and approaches, including both terrestrial and space-based services, mobile and fixed, licensed and unlicensed, involving public and private networks. Therefore, I believe that a holistic approach is what will enable us to achieve our goal. The second thought relates to the broader range of radio communication services, some of which do not yield revenues of spectrum auctions or might not have a visible commercial significance, but nevertheless are invaluable to a nation. For example, broadcasting services transmitting information about healthcare, or Earth exploration satellite services being used to monitor the forests, oceans, and the atmosphere of the Earth and providing early warnings to vulnerable populations. So all services, whether commercial or not, need to be considered by the national spectrum regulatory authorities when developing a long-term spectrum plan. I hope you enjoyed this event, and thank you very much for taking part in it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I would like again to extend a warm personal welcome to all of you to the seminar. And with that, I will hand over the floor to Mr. Dan from the Forum Global to start the next session. Thank you very much.
Ali, thank you very much. And thank you so much as well to all of our esteemed VIP speakers and guests in that opening session. I'm sure that all of you out there will agree it's an absolutely fantastic way to start this prestigious event. As Ali says, my name is Dan Kraft. I'm Managing Director at Forum Global, and it's an honor to have been asked by CITC and ITU to be your Masters of Ceremony for the event. I would like to start by adding my welcome to all of you out there who are joining us today from all over the world. We have more than 1,500 people, I understand, registered to attend the event in total, and we really are delighted that you will be able to join us. So we have a very busy schedule ahead of us, and shortly we're going to be starting things with our opening keynote presentation from Ajit Pai, who of course is chairman of the FCC. But just before we did that, I wanted to show you or give you a very brief overview for those of you who maybe haven't used the platform before that we're using for this virtual event, to give you a short overview about the platform and some of the different areas. You can see on the screen beside me here is the platform that we are going to be using. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look through the platform and start to familiarize yourself with that. You can see the menu down the left-hand side here. So down the left-hand side, you have the stage area, obviously where the sessions are taking place in. I'm sure you found that, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to be watching us here in this opening session now. And the other two areas I just wanted to mention were the networking area and the expo area. So in the networking area, we're actually going to be having a few networking discussions taking place during the course of the events. This will be an opportunity for you to connect one-to-one with other attendees who are participating on the platform. So you can access the networking area of the platform using that networking link there, and then click on the ready button, and you'll be automatically matched to somebody else on the platform. The other thing I just wanted to very briefly mention before we pass over into to Chairman Pai and start as I said, our opening keynote presentation is the exhibition area. So we do have some exhibition stands here from CITC, and we also have some details about our own series of Spectrum conferences, which you're able to view in the exhibition area there. So please do make the most of the platform during your time with us. Of course, we have a large number of sessions, but there are a number of breaks built in where you'll be able to navigate and to explore the different areas of the platform and to find out exactly what's happening there. But as I say, we do have a very busy 3 days ahead of us, so I think it's about time we got started. And it is my absolute honor to now welcome to the stage our first keynote speaker, Ajit Pai, Chairman of the FCC. Ajit, welcome, and I know it's relatively early in the morning there for you, so we really do appreciate you taking the time to come and open the conference with a keynote presentation, particularly given the time of day it is there. So with that, once again, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Good morning. I know it's the end of the day, as you said, for many people who are watching, but I just can't bring myself to say good afternoon before my morning coffee kicks in. But thank you to Forum Global for connecting us all. Thank you to my friend, Minister Alswaha, and everyone at the CITC for hosting today's event. It was a pleasure to be with the minister and his colleagues in Riyadh last year, and it's an honor to be with you virtually today. Thank you as well to Secretary General Zhao and everybody at the ITU for their work organizing today's discussion and for inviting me to participate. Special thanks to ITU-R Director Mario Manovich for warming up the audience for me in the previous session. It's always a pleasure to see him, even on the screen. And more important, thank you to Mario for your outstanding work helping to engineer a successful WRC 19. You've set the bar so high for WRC 23 that we're actually meeting in 3 years in advance to talk about how to clear that bar. Now, one of the benefits of giving the first keynote on the first day of a 3-day Spectrum conference is that I get to talk about 5G before everybody else. Of course, everybody's talking about 5G because of its potential to grow our economies and dramatically improve people's lives around the world. And soon, these next generation technologies, these wireless networks of the future, will affect almost every aspect of our economy and society, from businesses to homes, from transportation networks to the power grid, from hospitals to our manufacturing sector. Now, to capture these benefits, in 2018, the FCC here in the United States outlined a comprehensive strategy for the development and deployment of 5G technologies here in the United States. And we call that our 5G FAST plan. That plan has 3 basic parts: freeing up spectrum for the commercial marketplace, making it easier to deploy the wireless infrastructure of the future, and modernizing our regulations to promote the deployment of fiber, which is of course critical for backhaul of wireless traffic. And ever since 2018, the FCC has aggressively executed each part of that 5G FAST plan. For example, on spectrum, we have been the most aggressive and successful FCC in history. With 3 high-band spectrum auctions, we've made available more spectrum for commercial use than was previously used by all mobile broadband providers in the United States combined. We've already finished repurposing low-band spectrum in the 600 megahertz band for mobile broadband, which is now being used by 5G providers for service coverage to areas where 250 million Americans live. And over the past couple of days, past couple of years rather, we've been primarily focused on mid-band spectrum. Now, these airways are, of course, particularly appealing for 5G because they combine good geographic coverage with strong capacity. Now, I know many of you share this view. For instance, the European Commission has issued a directive that the 3.4 to 3.8 gigahertz band will be the first primary band for 5G in the European Union. Japan has awarded licenses in the 3.6 to 4.1 gigahertz band for 5G. And Australia has initiated a plan for fixed and mobile broadband use in the 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz band. So what is the FCC? What has the United States been doing on mid-band spectrum? We'll get comfortable because this could take a while. In July of 2019, for starters, the FCC adopted flexible new rules for the 2.5 gigahertz band. This is the United States' single largest band of contiguous spectrum below 3 gigahertz, and it's especially well suited for 5G deployment. We recently finished a rural tribal priority window to enable Native American tribes to get early and free access to this 2.5 gigahertz spectrum in rural areas. We intend to auction overlay licenses for any remaining spectrum shortly after we finish processing applications filed during that window, and we're aiming for an auction in 2021. We also made bold changes to bring the 3.5 gigahertz band into commercial use. Thanks to those changes, this past August, the FCC successfully completed an auction of 70 megahertz of licensed spectrum in the 3.5 gigahertz band, our first ever auction of mid-band spectrum for 5G. And we've completed the necessary technical work so that the band's entire 150 megahertz is now available for the private sector. Companies are already exploring novel solutions using this spectrum for things like private LTE networks. Additionally, this past August, the White House and the Department of Defense announced that the 3.45 to 3.55 gigahertz band should be made available for 5G as soon as possible. In September, the FCC immediately followed up on that announcement. We proposed to make this 100 megahertz of contiguous mid-band spectrum available for 5G while accommodating the limited federal operations that, for government incumbents that remain in that band. And I'm optimistic that here too, like the 2.5 gigahertz band, we will be able to auction the 3.45 to 3.55 gigahertz band next year. But the FCC's biggest auction of 5G mid-band spectrum actually starts today, just a few hours from now, as a matter of fact. We are beginning an auction as part of our reorganization of the 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz band, commonly called the C-band. This spectrum is now most commonly used by fixed satellite companies to beam content to video and audio broadcasters, to cable systems, and to other content distributors. But with advances in technology, the satellite companies currently operating the C-band can now provide the same services using alternative technologies or considerably less spectrum. And that is why this past February, the FCC voted to clear the lower 300 megahertz of the C-band and make 280 megahertz of it, from 3.7 to 3.98 gigahertz, available for 5G through a public auction. All eligible space station operators that are currently using this spectrum have committed to quickly relocating to the upper 200 megahertz of the C-band, meaning that these lower 280 megahertz will become available for 5G 2 to 4 years quicker than otherwise would have been the case. Now, to be clear, while we are repacking the C-band for 5G, this FCC has been a big proponent of new satellite services and applications. We approved a generation of low Earth orbit satellites, for example, satellites that have the potential to beam internet access back to Earth at a speed and at a price point that is comparable to a terrestrial provider. We've explored new sharing paradigms for satellite service in the millimeter wave bands, while preserving their primary use in the 48.2 to 50.2 gigahertz and 40 to 42 gigahertz bands. We've also facilitated the deployment of new Earth stations in motion, or eSIMs, which hold great potential to connect people while they're on a go, in a train, on a bus, or anywhere else in motion. So by eliminating regulatory burdens and adding frequencies where these receivers can operate, we expect this fast-growing segment of the satellite industry for eSIMs to innovate and invest in new technologies. But just as we are committed to promoting investment and innovation in space, we want to make sure that we are using valuable mid-band airwaves as efficiently as possible. And that's what we're aiming to do with the C-band auction. As I mentioned, this auction begins today in a few hours, and we're excited to get it started. So add all of these efforts up, 2.5, 3.45, 3.5, 3.7, when we are on a path to have a contiguous 530 megahertz swath from 3.45 to 3.98 gigahertz of mid-band spectrum available for 5G. Now, I'm confident that the actions that I've mentioned today will help spur the deployment of next-generation wireless technologies in the United States. But these efforts to make more spectrum available for 5G will have an even greater impact if we can create more opportunities for harmonization. Now, of course, international spectrum harmonization is the gold standard. But as we have seen at recent WRCs, reaching that standard isn't easy. And that's why it's not too early to look for new opportunities for harmonization at WRC 23. There's already an agenda item, number 1.2 to be specific, which will consider the possibility of making some bands between 3.3 and 10.5 gigahertz available for international mobile telecommunications, either on a regional or global basis. We should seize these opportunities and others. Now, I recognize that these discussions will be challenging and that just getting agreement on the wording of this agenda item was difficult. But nonetheless, with the spirit of cooperation and understanding that has gotten us this far with mid-band spectrum, I'm confident that working in good faith, we'll be able to identify additional spectrum at WRC 23. Now, before moving away from spectrum, a quick note on unlicensed spectrum. Earlier this year, the FCC made the entire 6 gigahertz band a massive 1200 megahertz testbed for innovation and innovators available for unlicensed use. And this past month, the FCC voted to make available 45 megahertz of spectrum in the 5.9 gigahertz band for unlicensed operations. With these actions, we have effectively increased the amount of mid-band spectrum available for Wi-Fi and other unlicensed technologies by a factor of 5. Now, some might suggest that Wi-Fi and cellular spectrum are rivals, but I actually believe that freeing up so much spectrum for unlicensed use will advance US leadership in 5G technologies. For instance, Cisco projects that 59% of mobile data traffic will be offloaded to Wi-Fi by 2022. And cellular operators can improve their 5G mobile coverage for broadband services by using the 6 gigahertz band. And that's because 3GPP Release 16 will now include a 5G new radio specification, 5G NRU, for unlicensed spectrum. So to me, cellular and Wi-Fi are not rivals. They're actually powerful complements and friends. So now, as I mentioned, spectrum is just one of the 3 planks of the FCC's 5G Fast Plan. We've also gotten major results on the other 2, promoting wireless infrastructure and modernizing our regulations to promote fiber deployment, which, as I said, is essential for wireless backhaul. Now, when it comes to 5G, we all understand that infrastructure will be essential. 5G's more densified networks will require that we install hundreds of thousands of small cells, an exponential increase in the number of antenna locations for our current networks. We will carry more fiber to connect more cell sites, we'll need more fiber to connect more cell sites and carry more data to the core of the network. Now, at the FCC, we've done a lot to streamline our rules and to make it easier to build, maintain, and expand the wireless and wireline networks of the future. For instance, to make it easier to install wireless infrastructure like small cells, we set a reasonable deadline for cities to rule on siting applications. We also required localities to set non-discriminatory fees for small cells, and we prohibited them from charging more than their reasonable costs. Also, to make it quicker and easier and cheaper to enable new attachments to poles, we adopted our so-called one-touch make-ready policy. So now, instead of having multiple parties prepare poles for a new attacher one at a time, which used to be the practice, a single construction crew can now do all of the make-ready work at once. This dramatically lowers the cost of deployment and increases the potential for competition from competitive fiber providers. We've also modernized rules to encourage carriers to transition from the fading copper networks of yesterday to the next generation networks built on fiber. And we also ended utility-style regulation of broadband internet infrastructure based on rules developed in the 1930s. Now, all of these reforms I've just described and more have helped to spur record-breaking capital investments in infrastructure essential for 5G, including fiber optic cables and small cells. In 2018, and then again in 2019, the United States set records for annual fiber deployment. And the number of cell sites in the United States has skyrocketed. During 2018 and 2019, we added more than 72,000 new wireless cell sites in the United States. That is 10 times more than the number of cell sites added from 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016 combined. Overall, bottom line from all of these things, spectrum, wireless infrastructure, and fiber, we have put in place a regulatory framework and we have gotten results to enable the United States to deliver 5G fast. But we recognize that it's not enough to simply have strong 5G networks. The FCC is also committed to making sure that those networks are secure. For years, US government officials have expressed concern about the national security threats posed by certain foreign communications network providers. To counter this risk, the FCC has prohibited money from our Universal Service Fund from being spent on any equipment or services produced or provided by companies posing a national security threat, including the world's largest 5G global supplier, Huawei. Fortunately, technological innovation has the potential to address these security concerns. In particular, open radio access networks, or Open RANs, could transform 5G network architecture, costs, and security. This fall, the FCC held a forum on open, interoperable, standards-based, and virtualized radio access networks. A consensus emerged from the forum that Open RAN technologies are already showing great promise in the United States and around the world, and that the public and private sectors should continue to encourage their development and deployment. After all, these systems, Open RAN systems, can enable diversity in suppliers, they can improve network security, and they can lower costs for operators and consumers alike. Here, our belief is that when it comes to 5G, we cannot simply make a risk and hope for the best. We must see clearly the threats to security of our networks and act to address those threats. And the more that nations represented at this conference can work together and make security decisions based on shared principles, the safer that all of our 5G networks will be. Now, speaking of international cooperation, and in closing, I would like to acknowledge that this will be my last time addressing the ITU as FCC chairman. I recently announced that I will be leaving the FCC on January 21st of 2021. Serving as the FCC chairman has been the greatest professional honor of my life. It's given me the chance to travel around the country and around the world, to meeting new people like many of you, and forming new relationships, as well as strengthening old ones. I'm so grateful to have had the chance to work with so many of you over the past several years, including at the Plenipotentiary in 2018 and the WRC in 2019. And I'm proud of the progress we've made together and the friendships that we have built together. Thank you so much for your partnership over the years, and here's to an even brighter digital future. Shukran.
Ajit, thank you so much for those words, and yeah, really appreciate you being with us here so early and taking part in the event in that way. So thank you so much for that contribution. As I said, it was a fantastic way to kick off our event, to start our event, to have Ajit here with us, and I'm sure everyone here will join me in congratulating Ajit for his achievements in his time as chairman of FCC. There's been so many different areas in which he's made some absolutely fantastic achievements, pushing forward 5G. He's mentioned the 5G fast plan, closing the digital divide, promoting public safety in so many more ways. So I'd like to finish by once again thanking Ajit for time and contribution today. And of course, I'm sure on behalf of all of us, wishing him all the best for the final few months of his chairmanship, and of course, with whatever he chooses to do in the future. So Ajit, thank you so much. So we have a very busy schedule ahead of us, so we better now move on. Over the course of the next 3 days, in total, we have more than 13 sessions. Sorry, we don't. We have exactly 13 sessions, but we have more than 80 high-level speakers who are going to be participating as part of that. One thing I didn't mention when I briefly showed you the platform earlier, I didn't show you where you can find the schedule. So if you go to the reception page, you can find the full schedule for the event, the 3 days of the event, on that schedule page on the reception area of the platform. So we're going to get started very shortly now with session 1. Session 1 is going to be setting the scene for the conference. We're going to be focusing broadly on a review of key spectrum goals, principles, challenges, and best practices. And we're delighted to have with us a panel of top-level regulatory experts from around the world. We have speakers from Europe, Asia, the Americas, and Sub-Saharan Africa. And the moderator for the session is going to be Blair Levin. So we're really looking forward to hearing what they are going to say. Please stay here on the main stage. That session is going to be starting here on the main stage in about 5 minutes or so. And then following that, I will be back here to tell you a little bit more about the rest of the event that follows. So 5 minutes or so, we'll be starting again here with the next session. But in the meantime, I would like to once again thank all of our speakers for from the opening ceremony, and also, of course, to Chairman Pai once again for his keynote presentation. As I said, we'll be back here in about 5 minutes with the start of the first session. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you back here shortly.